I want to really drill down on this, Jake, because it's so important. There's 2 million employees in the federal government. Overwhelmingly, the career federal service in this country is far left wing. The American people.
I don't know that to be a fact.
Stephen Miller's claim that nearly all people who work for the federal government are like leftists likely explains why last night President Donald Trump and his administration offered buyouts for federal workers willing to resign from their post. Now, of course, President Donald Trump, along with Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, seem to feel purging the government of federal workers is actually a really great way to reduce spending and limit the size of government. But there are substantial consequences to what they're pursuing. And before we get to those ramifications, well, let me tell you what is actually happening, what Trump's plan entails. So Trump's administration is offering 2 million federal workers the chance to take a deferred resignation, which means that if they agree to resign between now and February 6th, the administration would pay their full salaries through September. Now, the offer was made through a memo by the Office of Personnel Management titled "A Fork in the Road." That was emailed to federal employees. It laid out 4 pillars that the reformed federal workforce will be built around, noting that the federal workforce should be comprised of employees who are reliable, loyal, trustworthy, and who strive for excellence in their daily work. Employees will be subject to enhanced standards of suitability and conduct as we move forward. I think the word loyalty is especially relevant in that statement. But nonetheless, employees who wish to resign were told to 1, select reply to this email, 2, type the word resign into the body of this reply email, hit send. I like how thorough they were with the instructions there. Now, according to a guidance memo from the Office of Personnel Management, employees who accept the offer will promptly have their duties reassigned or eliminated. I think they're looking to eliminate these roles. Now, they will then be placed on paid administrative leave until the end of September. A full-time federal employee or all full-time federal employees are eligible to take this offer with a few exceptions, which include members of the military, postal workers, and positions related to immigration enforcement and national security. But if the federal workers decide, nah, I'm gonna refuse to take this deal, and they think that their jobs will be safe, they're sadly mistaken. Trump's administration actually made very clear, writing that at this time, we cannot give you full assurance regarding the certainty of your position or agency, but should your position be eliminated, you will be treated with dignity and will be afforded the protections in place for such positions. Now, an email to the heads of federal agencies also said that a substantial number of workers could be reclassified to at-will status, which, to be clear, would make it significantly easier to fire them. As far as the Department of Government Efficiency goes, it's pretty clear that the leader, Elon Musk, had a hand in crafting this email. Why do I say that? Well, it had the same subject line and similar language as an email that he sent asking Twitter employees to resign back in 2022. So how many federal workers are likely to take this offer, especially since those who don't could still lose their jobs? Well, a senior administration official told NBC News that they expect 5% to 10% of the federal workforce to quit, which they estimate could lead to around $100 billion in savings. And while 5 to 10% doesn't really seem like that much, in reality, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who would leave their roles in the federal government. Remember, there are about 2 million federal workers. And while there is certainly waste and way too much bureaucracy in Washington, I'm not denying that that's a reality. This ham-handed approach could really backfire. Untold numbers of frontline health workers in the Veterans Affairs Department, officials who process loans for home buyers or small businesses, and contractors who help procure the next generation of military weaponry, I think we can get rid of them, could all head for the exits at once. It could also mean losing experienced food inspectors and scientists who test the water supply while disrupting everything from air travel to consumer product protections. Terry Clower, who's an economist over at George Mason University, says that the offer could also spur the most talented federal employees with the best private sector prospects to leave. So how does that work if you're trying to accelerate government efficiency if who you drive away are your best workers? Democrats like Tim Kaine are also warning the federal workers to not take Donald Trump's deal, but he gives them this advice for a completely different reason. Let's take a look.
The federal employees received an interesting email at the end of the day today. Tender your resignation, and then boy, it's just gonna be a gravy train. You're just gonna get paid for 7 months without working. The president has no authority to make that offer. There's no budget line item to pay people who are not showing up for work. This is a guy who made this promise to contractors again and again and again when he was a private business guy. So my message to federal employees who received this is, yeah, the president has tried to terrorize you for about a week and then gives you a little sweetheart offer. Don't be fooled. He's tricked hundreds of people with that offer. If you accept that offer and resign, he'll stiff you just like he stiffed the contractors. He doesn't have any authority to do this.
Well, to be fair, contractors often aren't represented by unions, but these federal workers are. So if they're promised this deal and then Donald Trump doesn't make good on that deal, well, they have union representation that can pursue litigation against the federal government. Also, unions representing federal workers are furious and say that their members will actually get stiffed. So it's interesting because the unions agree and they want their workers to stay in place. And ironically, the buyout offer may have the opposite, exact opposite effect of what Trump intended, because some federal workers are now saying that the offer convinced them to stay in their positions despite initially wanting to leave the federal government. In the popular Fed News subreddit, one alleged federal worker wrote, quote, "I'll be honest, before that email went out, I was looking for any way to get out of this fresh hell. But now I am fired up to make these goons as frustrated as possible. Return to office, be damned." And that's the other thing. In order to inflict a little bit of pain for those who choose to keep their jobs in the federal government, Donald Trump is requiring them to go back to the office. Another worker wrote, quote, "I've never been more motivated to stay. Before the buyout memo, I was ready to go job hunting, but then a revelation hit. I took an oath under this position to the American people, and leaving my job under the current state would be failing to maintain my oath as a civil servant." So we'll see how this plays out, but clearly Donald Trump is attempting to push people out of the federal government. This is something that he promised to do on the campaign trail, so I'm not surprised that he's doing it. And maybe this is the first phase, try to weed people out with an offer, with a, if he actually follows through on it, a relatively decent severance for people who are going to not have to worry about going into work and don't have to worry about a paycheck up until September of this year. But a lot of people are apparently deciding that they're gonna stay. And the question is, what does he do after that? And look, I actually don't really have a problem with audits being done to see whether or not there's too much bureaucracy in a government agency, to question whether or not there's any waste of taxpayer resources. I think that would be totally fine. But I do see this as a little bit of a ham-handed approach, and it could get worse depending on what his next step is after seeing how many of these federal workers are willing to take this deal. But we're gonna update you on this story, and obviously we'll give you the details if these moves have any negative impact on Americans' day-to-day lives and the services that they expect from the federal government, considering the resources they provide to the federal government in the form of their taxes.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.